Are we being cut off from important aspects of reality to keep us conditioned conformists? Hello there, you 5.6 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage towards truth. I know it's not always easy to be alive, but it will get better. It will get easier. You are on the precipice of awakening. Your whole life you've known there's something wrong with this system, and you were right, and we can change it together. And one of the ways we might change it is through experimenting with the nature of consciousness. I'm certainly not endorsing any illicit substances. I would never be so irresponsible. If you don't subscribe to this channel yet, subscribe right now. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. And remember, in the comments below, tell me what you think about the psychedelic revolution and the importance of altering your consciousness in order to alter reality. Why do you think pharmaceutical companies are suddenly interested in psychedelics? What's going on in that field? In my conversation with Nicolas Glynos on my podcast, Under the Skin, available from Luminary, we talked about DMT, Ayahuasca, all kinds of psychedelic experiences, even though I strongly do not endorse the use of any drugs. I myself am in recovery, have been for 19 and a half years now. And the nature of consciousness. Why does DMT occur naturally in many biological entities? What is it that we can learn from these experiences? Is it possible that if you can transcend your individual self, you can change society fundamentally? Why are psychedelics being so tightly controlled? Stay to the end of this conversation. I know you're going to learn a lot from it, and let me know in the comments below about your own experiences with psychedelics, your own experiences with transcendence. I'm fascinated to hear more from you. Stay to the end.
Is it true that when you observe the brain of someone who's had DMT administered, there is not more neurological activity, but less?
Depending on which areas you look in. So a lot of the research has shown these regions called the default mode network, which has been attributed to thoughts of the self, thoughts of like mind wandering, mental time travel, planning, preparation, things like that. That brain network seems to be subdued and activity seems to be reduced. And there's more than a dozen. There's several ways to measure the brain, to image the brain under psychedelics. And some of the things we're doing is looking at EEG activity. So that's more kind of global cortical activity. And we see a lot of different patterns emerging there. Other ways are to look at like neuroplasticity, neurochemistry, what kind of neurotransmitters, what kind of molecules are responsible or are released after DMT. But certainly the default mode network seems to be one of the common features of not only DMT, but a number of other serotonergic psychedelic substances.
I was just thinking of my own subjective experience, that my continually narrativizing, projecting, remembering, the difficulty of remaining absolutely present in the moment. Just yesterday, I was in a coastal hotel in a place called Blackpool in England. And do you know there's an air of subdued sanctity there, as if like a place of kitsch and vulgarity has been built on top of something beautiful and natural, but becomes most evident and obvious when you look at the sea, which is separated from the human settlement by 3 rather aggressive roads and sort of promenades. But when you get actually to the beach and to the water, and if you stare at the water with the light on it, as I did yesterday, there was just a moment where my narrativizing mind temporarily ceased, and there's a sense of awe and wonder and something a little like the G-force of being on a roller coaster, which I also did while in Blackpool. And I feel like that there is, like you said, that the one component of the reported DMT experience is this familiarity. I sense that the sacred, the rapture, enlightenment, awakening, these are not, they're esoteric in the sense of they're seldom achieved and that they are high, that they are Empyrean, but they are ordinary and accessible to all people. And I think somehow we are stimulated away from those states by social structures that continually agitate fear and desire, distractions, and so the idea that part of the mind that you said is likely responsible for sort of, planning and daydreaming and just wandering, that is temporarily annulled, and that the consequence of that is this kind of dormant wonder roars to the full forefront. That sort of excites me. That excites me.
A lot of research, Dr. Carhart Harris, I know who you've had on the podcast
yes.
before too. He's done a lot of work in that field, and it's been speculated, and I'm not sure if this is really verified. It's certainly not verified, but the idea that the default mode network, that what I was just talking about, is somewhat related to the occurrence of the ego. And just as you said, if you can sort of shut down that ego, and people talk about psychedelics as ego dissolving substances, and if you can sort of shut down that constant monkey brain, that mind wandering, that mental time travel, if you can shut that down, then seeing what emerges there is potentially something that's always there. We're just not noticing it because we have this sort of a reducing valve in our brain that's only letting in a certain flow of information, when in reality there's other things, other forms of consciousness to experience.
Yeah, I feel that that's true. So you talked about ayahuasca, and you mentioned it's some sort of I can't remember exactly what you said, but you said it's like a miracle or it don't make sense or something. Can you just go back to that, mate?
Yeah, it's one of the greatest mysteries of ethnobotany, is I think what I said, and that's attributed to Richard Evans Schultes, who was the father of ethnobotany, and Wade Davis, who was one of his trainees and students, also did some work with ayahuasca and came to that conclusion. And it's very interesting because so the thing about DMT is it's not orally active. So if you have a plant that contains DMT and you eat the plant, then you're not going to trip on DMT. If you consume a capsule of purified DMT, you're not going to trip on DMT. Like I said, it's very rapidly metabolized. So the enzymes in our body, as DMT passes through first pass metabolism, the liver, everything else, deactivates that DMT. So it's not going to allow you to have a psychedelic experience. But what you can do is you can combine the DMT with an inhibitor of the enzymes that normally break it down. And that's called a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So if you take DMT with one of those inhibitors, then DMT becomes orally active. So you can consume it and actually have the psychedelic experience. So it's sort of this, you're sort of hacking the endogenous chemistry of our body to allow DMT to become orally active. And ayahuasca is exactly that. So it's a combination of usually two plants, oftentimes a couple of other plants that are added, and there's various recipes. But there's the main two plants are the one that contains the DMT, and then the other plant that contains the enzyme inhibitor. So when you combine those two plants and make a brew or make a tea and you consume it, then you have ayahuasca and you have this very prolonged DMT experience. And it's active for longer in the body than DMT alone would be, because you're taking it with that inhibitor to allow the DMT to avoid the metabolism. And that's very interesting because in South America, all across South America, not just one indigenous group figured out this random combination, but hundreds of them across multiple countries, all across the Amazon basin. And this isn't just this is in one of the most richly diverse botanical regions of the world. There's 80,000 species of vascular plants. There's 80,000 different plants you could combine to make this happen. And they found the two that actually make it work. And oftentimes, if you take one or two of them alone, then there are no effects. There's sickness, there's nausea. But combining them both to make this brew allows for this intensely powerful and what became a culturally and historically very, very significant and important brew for a number of different indigenous groups all across northwestern South America. So it's and it's a great mystery. So how did the indigenous people, with obviously no modern chemistry or empirical testing tools, figure this out? And I've traveled a bit to Central America and talked to a few people about this, and really one of the most common answers that comes is,
I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, perhaps you'll consider subscribing to Luminary and listening to my podcast Under the Skin. There's fantastic people on there. If you enjoyed this conversation, please give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel. Do you know only 60% of you subscribe? If you enjoyed this video, have a look at one of these two. They're both fantastic videos. Please subscribe to my mailing list as well. I do live Zoom calls, really intimate, fun, a right royal laugh. I tell you about live experiences that I'm doing. I give you intimate thoughts and direct access to the stuff we're doing here, building this stay free movement together. More important than any of that, though, is that you, personally, please stay free.